Hello friends, this is Growl, and welcome to the 10.0.5 update to my Resto Druid guide for Dragonflight. I decided since there is enough changes in this patch, and just some things have changed with the way people have played the class, I've gotten a lot of questions since the first guide, I thought it would be good to come out with sort of an expansion guide. That being said, the first guide is definitely a prerequisite to this. I would consider this a guide if you've been playing your Druid mostly this patch, and you're looking to push 20 keys or higher. If you're just getting started, working up the ranks and gearing up, I would still highly recommend my first Druid guide, which there will be a link in the description. So that being said, I first will give a short talk about how I think the state of Resto Druid is. Honestly, Resto Druid kind of still owns. The beginning of the patch, I thought Resto Druid was very solid. Thought it competed with Evoker. I think just depending on the group comp, and we've been seeing people settle on different comps, I think Druid and Evoker both fit well. Depending on the dungeon, depending on the situation, for example, I feel Druid's a little bit better at dealing with explosives and dealing with certain bosses. Evoker can be better at dealing with certain bosses, certain affixes, like Grievous I find a little bit easier to handle with Evoker just because you can top the party easier with less globals. And so it just, the short answer is it depends which one I think is better. If you're still deciding what to make, or you're wondering, like, should I reroll? Personally, I think Druid can do basically any world first key. It's the best healer, probably the most flexible. It might be behind Evoker in some capacity, but I think they genuinely just bring two very different toolkits to. However, Evoker did not get nerfed much in 10.05. They actually kind of got buffed, and Druid did in fact get nerfed, so I'll talk about the nerfs real quick. Protector of the Pack is the big one. This one got sort of stealth nerfed in that they didn't quite tell you, but it stopped working with a bunch of your good Druid stuff. It stopped being able to crit. It stopped working with your adaptive swarm. I believe there's a few other things that happened to it, but the short answer is that it got nerfed very heavily in damage. And in order to compensate for that, I believe they raised the cap, which helps a little bit. My understanding is it's somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's say, a 30% damage nerf, depending on how you played with it before. Personally, I don't think it was that unwarranted. I mean, this talent was insanely good. It did so much damage in keys, especially single target. However, I'm still picking it sometimes, but I do not think it's mandatory anymore. The next nerf was to Verdancy. This was a very strong healing tool, and it still is in 5-mans, especially with the double life bloom build. And we will actually talk about this later, but this was a very small nerf, and we're not worried about this too much. The last nerf was to Adaptive Swarm. I believe it was like 5% effectiveness nerf. And yeah, it's a bummer. Adaptive Swarm is a very big part of our damage and healing. Very strong. Did it need a nerf? Yeah, probably. My overall feelings is I think most of the stuff that was nerfed with Druid was warranted. It doesn't really change at all how you play. However, Evoker kind of slid by pretty easily with no nerfs. Anyway, ignore these talents for now. First, I want to talk about a few easier things, like stats. So, in the beginning of the patch, I talked a little bit about two different types of builds. Let's say a healing focused build where you mostly get mastery, and a more damage focused build where you go either crit or verse. I would say now that most of the really tough bosses have been nerfed, I think you don't really need to have a healing build. I think once you're going in 20 plus keys, you can basically fully focus for damage. If you're one of the people that says, Growl, I don't care, I want to have healing, mastery is a great healing stat. Go ahead, get some mastery if you want, but for those of us that like to do damage and care about your damage, you mostly want to go haste with some crit and some verse. One question I get about stats often is there a haste breakpoint, and when is too much haste? And personally, I don't think there's going to be too much haste, at least for now. Maybe in future patches, as numbers go big, you will have too much haste, but right now I'm sitting at something like 31% base. Essentially, the way stats work is as you get to 30% only from your gear, it starts to diminish very slowly. You'll only get 90% of everything after 30, and then 80% of everything after 40. So basically, it's like at 40 you sort of need to worry about it, but The short answer is it just has to do with your mana, and if you feel like your heals are doing something. If you ever feel like you're running out of mana constantly just mashing all your heals, maybe then you can consider lowering your haste, but for now I'm just piling as much haste as possible, and then crit and verse both on the side. Gemming wise, I've been gemming verse with my stuff, but I think crit is very, very good too. Verse, I would say, is almost mandatory on most healers just to survive. Especially things like Evoker and Priest where you're worried about getting one shot. As a Druid, you always have the opportunity to bear form, which essentially like, you know, increases your health a lot and turns you into having high verse. So I don't think having versatility is that mandatory as a Druid. So if you wanted to max out crit, I'd say that's fine too, although I do like verse. Now for trinkets, I think the ideal BIS setup is going to be one stat stick and then either one offensive or defensive trinket. So right now, the best stat stick is going to be the Whispering Incarnate icon from the raid. It is the second boss, and honestly, this boss is very, very easily puggable, even on Mythic if you have the gear, the Primal Council. So I would highly recommend doing this boss on Heroic and Mythic when possible every single week, just to get this trinket. It's not only good for you, great for you, but it's also great for your team. A lot of people use this trinket. It's very, very strong. If you cannot get a hold of this, I would recommend crafting Elkstone, or you can use the Court of Stars trinket, the haste one. All of those are acceptable stat sticks that work. In terms of your second trinket, for damage, I really like the Whetstone. Whetstone I feel like is really strong on single target. I see a lot of people using the Feather from Noku Defensive as well, the Rage Feather. Personally, I just haven't gotten one to drop to be able to try it out, and I was lucky enough to have someone give me this Whetstone with Avoidance. So I don't know which one is better. Probably farm. I feel like the Feather is probably slightly better, but both of them are very good. Court of Stars is a very easy dungeon to farm. Lots of people farm it, whereas Nokid, if you're farming 20 Nokids, it can get frustrating sometimes. And then for a defense trinket, let's say it's a dungeon where I feel relatively safe, or maybe I need more tank healing, or, you know, healing in general. Your best trinket is going to be your Broodkeeper's Promise. This is from the second to last boss of the raid. Much tougher to pug, however, a heroic one will do. And you could also just use something else in the slot. I wouldn't say this is mandatory, but this is going to be your highest HPS trinket, and this is very, very nice. Next, we will go to talents. Actually, let's talk about embellishments and crafted gear first. So this is just the stuff that I crafted. So it depends a lot on your item level. Sparks of innovation by now in the patch are somewhat plentiful. You can get lots of them. As you're leveling up, if you're like 400 item level, 390 item level, don't worry about, oh, I need this one, it's BIS, and you know, this combination. What you need to do is you need to just raise your item level so that you can get into better groups, so you can get to plus 20s done. If you're not at the point where you're timing plus 20s, you shouldn't worry so much about little embellishments and, you know, things like what's BIS on your gear, and you should just get this item level up so you can start getting into better groups. Just look for pieces. You know, let's say you have a 372 helm from Mythic 0, just make a helm. Like, it doesn't matter if you feel like you need the helm or not. Use the crafted stuff to boost up your gear. What I think are BIS embellishments, there's three notable ones. The first one is the Lariat. This is just an all-around stat bonus. You see lots and lots of people making this. It's not super amazing. It's like, you know, an extra 200 stats. So basically it's like having another 2 sockets, which is cool. The next embellishment, which is really, really nice for damage and healing, is the Dragon Isle's Potion Duration. This increases potions, which if you use the Potion of Shocking Disclosure, it actually increases the duration by a lot. And this thing does a lot of damage in dungeons. So if I'll just pull a random dungeon here, This did almost 8% of my damage. This is a 24 Halls of Valor I did last night. This is doing a lot of damage, so essentially increasing this by 50%. This is increasing my overall DPS by 2.5, and let's see. So I only used 6 potions as well, so I maybe could have even gotten a 7th or 8th potion in there. So this is a really good one to increase your DPS. On top of that, for mana, you have the Potion of Chilled Clarity, which essentially gives you Innervate for 20 plus seconds if you have this embellishment. So this is just a very, very, very strong embellishment for potions. I would say this is actually my favorite and the best one, just because it works for healing and damage, and it's really good. Yeah, so I would highly recommend this one if you're using potions. If you're cheap or you don't have gold or whatever and you're not using potions in dungeons, don't worry about it. But once you start using potions, you're going to love this thing. And the last one, which I don't have, but a lot of people ask about and you see people use, is the helm with the fire damage proc on it. And the reason you use that is because you get the ring from the raid that is doing extra damage when you do fire damage. This is a really nice ring. It's really high item level. This will contribute roughly 2 to 3% of your overall, and the helmet will also add another 1% overall. So this is going to be your highest DPS option probably, to use this ring and to use that helm. However, number one, it requires both of those pieces. Number two, your helm is a tier slot, so if you have something like a really good helmet like this, do you really, I have to reconfigure my gear to use it. And number three, you're also like you don't get any haste on this ring, which is kind of fine. It's just kind of like it plays a little clunky. So I haven't even gotten a hold of one of these rings yet. As it says, they're very rare. I can't get this, so I'll eventually try this out, but I would recommend 2 of those 3. Personally, I like potions in the lariat. It's flexible, it's good for healing and damage, it works in raid, it's bis and raid as well. So this is what I would do for my embellishments. And then once you get fancy, you can try the fire one, or if you're lucky, let's say you get a ring out of your vault or something like that and you want to try it out, you can make your helm. Don't forget, there is another embellishment you can use that's free. It doesn't cost, well, it's actually the opposite of free. They're very expensive. They're like 100k or something to craft. Increased duration of well-fed bonus, and it persists through death. And if you're like me, I die a lot, and having a 2-hour food buff that you never have to renew is so unbelievably nice for dungeons. So I would highly, highly recommend getting this if you can get some gold. Again, I don't know, go farm, go pick some herbs or something, put in the grind, because this is going to be worth it. It's very, very convenient. While we're oh no, server shut down in 13. All right, speed run. We have professions. My profession is alchemy and leatherworking. It doesn't really matter what professions you are. However, alchemy has a few nice benefits. You can increase your file duration and increase your HP when you use HP potions. They're very, very small, but they're nice. And I like having alchemy anyway because, I don't know, just convenient. So you have really long flasks, you have really long food buff. I wouldn't worry too much about professions. I would say mainly at this point in the patch, you can just kind of buy whatever you need. There's not any big benefits from them. All right, let's talk about talents real quick. So they changed around the tree a lot. The big thing that they did, number one, they made it much easier to get your interrupts. Now that's 1 less point here. However, they took Sunfire, improved Sunfire, and they threw it in the middle of Narnia. So now you're forced to go down. Before you were forced to go down Cat to get Protector. Now you're forced to go down Moonkin to get improved Sunfire. So this is the build sort of that I've been running. A couple changes. Number one, you can move these 3 points over here to get Kick. If you're in Pugs, I would highly, highly, highly recommend getting Kick. Having an extra kick is so good, and I see so many druids not taking kick, and I feel like it's super, super greedy. This was in an organized group, and it was also with a group that I don't normally play with, and so I don't really expect them utilizing my kick that much, but I would highly recommend, if you're doing this most of the time, taking thick hide and not taking kick, I feel like you're being lazy. So this is basically the default tree. If you do not need improved nature's cure, you can take this out and put this into either natural recovery, this is my go-to just because it does 2% healing. Star Surge is a little nice for single target damage if you want to blast, or Typhoon is another very, very good utility spell that's handy. You can use this if you need. Another option is you can take these points out, these 2 or 3, and go down here to get Heart of the Wild. Personally, I haven't been playing with Heart of the Wild that much. I think if you're taking Star Surge and you have 1 minute Convoke and you're Boomkin Convoking, you want to do that. I haven't tried it though personally. I feel like Protector of the Pack is still more convenient, especially in tougher moments where you need to be doing a lot of damage. However, I've been seeing, Renewal is really nice, Improved Stampeding Roar is really nice. And so Heart of the Wild can feel a little clunky, I think, especially in pugs. You press it and then they just start dying. Your teammates start dying or whatever. Other than that, Improved Rejuve is actually very tough to get. Things you can sacrifice include Wild Charge if you want to. But the problem is you also need to have 2 points in Natural Recovery. So yeah, this one becomes a little bit of a pain if you want to try and get Improved Rejuve. On the spec tree, not much has changed over here. This is the build that I run. Some of this stuff you can kind of move around. Some questions that I have are, is Nourish good now? And Nourish might be good, but the problem is I'm never running Mastery, really. So maybe in some dungeons, like for example, to help heal the 3rd boss of Jade Temple, to help heal your tank, you might run Nourish. But other than that, I feel like with very low mastery, it's probably not worth it to spend these points. However, I could be wrong. Maybe this is worth experimenting with, but I don't find myself needing to spam single target healing very much. Some other questions. So now I've removed Cultivation. This is a talent that I used to run. However, again, because my mastery is very low now and I'm not trying to get mastery, this becomes less useful. A very good talent that I feel like not a lot of people talk about is Inner Peace. Remember, not only does this reduce Trank, but it also gives you 20% damage reduction while channeling. So you can use this as sort of a pseudo defensive when you're under attack by pressing Trank. It's very, very good for a lot of bosses that do AoE damage. Thinking about, the second boss of Noka Defensive, the last boss of Quarter Stars, any boss that's like pulsing AoE damage that's not insanely high, but you want to get used to that DR. The big question with talents in here is you have these 3. You have Spring Blossoms, you have Circle of Life and Death, and you have 1 minute Convoke. And you can switch you can take 2 of the 3 in my opinion. All the other talents are pretty much non-negotiable. You need all of these pretty much. Circle of Life and Death is going to be your highest DPS option. It makes your Moonfire and Sunfire basically go end faster so that you can reapply them, and those are going to be your most efficient globals damage wise. However, it doesn't really contribute that much to healing. It makes your heals expire faster, but you have to keep putting them up. So whether you're putting up that same heal or a different heal doesn't make too much of a difference in terms of healing, and it's only 15%. So this is mostly for damage. However, damage is nice. Spring Blossoms is really, really nice. It's even if you don't have high mastery, it still contributes a pretty decent amount of healing. And also remember, it's proccing our Verdancy as well, which whenever we have people in the FLO with Life Bloom, it's nice. And 1 minute Convoke is kind of situational. Personally, like I'll use this for healing, and then if I feel like I really want to do damage, but also my team is stacked a lot, I'll play like this, and I'll just get rid of 1 minute Convoke. If I feel like my team isn't really getting that good value out of Spring Blossoms, let's say I'm in a pug and I have double ranged or something, or just monkeys, or whatever boss I'm worried about, I don't think they're going to stand in FLO, you can run a build like this, or you can just go like this for the max healing build. I think all these are fine. This is mainly just preference. I see a lot of people pop in my stream being like, oh, you stopped playing Spring Blossoms, or oh, you stopped playing 1 minute Convoke, or what dungeon, it's just more of a preference, how I feel, what team I'm in, what the affixes are, what things I'm worried about. I kind of changed these 3 from random. A couple more things real quick, questions that I get often that are talent related. One thing that I didn't really talk about in my initial guide, but are very, very powerful, are verdancy plus rampant growth plus AoE healing. So verdancy essentially gives you another benefit for putting your life bloom on your teammates. So for example, when you have life bloom on allies, you have a chance to bloom it while it's active, assuming that there are other hots on them. So this just gives you more of a reason to put it on other people. So generally speaking, for healing, the default with life bloom is sort of like 1 life bloom on the tank, 1 life bloom on yourself, and then you just hot everyone up. However, that's not so much the case anymore, and you almost always want to be using life bloom on people who just need the healing. Don't worry so much about who the target is. Just think about how, especially for group damage, think about how squishy they are, think about how much healing they need, what defensives they have, and I'll even like cycle my life bloom around a little bit. Just to kind of keep it on everybody and then keep spreading the love, and just because verdancy gives you so much more incentive to put life bloom on other people that's just not yourself. If you're taking damage, you still want to put life bloom on yourself, but think about just the combination of life bloom counting as 3 stacks of mastery, life bloom healing more with 2 ranks of this talent, and these verdancy procs. Whoever has life bloom is going to be getting juiced. And so make sure you're pressing your life blooms wisely and not just autopiloting on, you know, yourself and the tank every time, especially for AoE damage, because having, you know, if you have 2 squishy DPS and you're chilling because you have leech or whatever, you know, having 2 life blooms on 2 of your DPS can make a world of difference. And don't forget, on top of that, rampant growth. This one confused people sometimes if you're not used to the BFA talent. But basically, this literally applies regrowth hot on whoever has life bloom. So if you put life bloom on yourself, then you put life bloom on the tank, then you regrowth one of the DPS, both you and the tank will get the regrowth. And so essentially what this means is you can do a lot of regrowth healing without pressing the button that much. So again, you want to have life bloom on 2 different people, make sure your FLO is down, then you regrowth a 3rd person, and then it puts regrowth on all those people. And again, remember, we have this whole synergy going with photosynthesis, making hots proc our life bloom, and then when our life bloom procs, it's going to heal everybody, and then this rampant growth is going to make sure that there's always regrowth on the people with the life bloom. So be careful not to regrowth people when they have life bloom when you're running rampant growth, because, well, they're already gonna get that bonus anyway. All right, server shut down in 3 minutes. I guess the last thing that we're going to talk about is Nature's Vigil and Flourish. A lot of people wonder how to use these abilities, because Flourish does a lot of damage. So the short answer is I'm troll right now, and I have macroed Nature's Vigil, Flourish, and Berserking all to 1 button, and I press it very often. That's my go-to cooldown. Anytime I want to do extra healing, I'll press it. Even just for 1 person, for example, you can have a lot of hots on the tank, life bloom yourself, Flourish, and then that's it. While Flourish is active, you want to maintain both of your life blooms and send ward when it comes up, and you also want to throw out a couple rejuves if possible. Don't worry about creating this super Flourish ramp to do damage. Flourish does damage, but what's nice about Flourish damage is it's passive. So if you're pressing Flourish and then you're just spamming regrowth on your whole party for 30 seconds, it's like, well, you could have just been pressing Moonfire or whatever. It doesn't, like, Flourish isn't that powerful where you want to just completely, like, do it just to do damage. It's kind of or when I say Flourish, I mean Nature's Vigil, because I'm pressing, to me they're the same button because I'm pressing both of them. So in short, I would recommend macroing Nature's Vigil to Flourish, and I would recommend trying to press it often. Don't hold. Flourish is not an emergency button, it's a proactive button. A button like Trank or Convoke could be considered an emergency button. Flourish is not an emergency button. You want to be proactive with this. So if you're just in a pack and you have, you know, the team is taking some damage and you have Flourish available, just throw out the hots, press Flourish, and just get in the habit of doing that every time with your Nature's Vigil. That way, number 1, you're saving your mana, because once you Flourish, you could just get into cat form or boomkin form and do damage. And then number 2, you're also saving globals, so you're doing more damage. And then number 3, you're just doing damage from the Nature's Vigil. So in short, don't overthink it, macro them together, press it often. I see people doing nonsense stuff like pressing, like macroing Nature's Vigil into their rejuve or something, just so it has high uptime. That's totally unnecessary. Just use it with your Flourish and use it with 2 Life Blooms active as much as you can. And yeah, that wraps up this video. I guess we have 1 minute left, so we'll talk about Convoke. Now that we have Boom Conform, you don't want to use Boom Conform to use your abilities. Don't shift into Moon Conform to press Starfire or Star Surge. It's only for Convoke. So my understanding is like 1 target or maybe 2 targets you cat form, and then any AoE you want to use Moon can Convoke. I could be wrong, it might just be Moon can Convoke all the time, but I also like convoking as cat form because it gives you combo points and then you have another big bite after. So I think it's single target Convoke cat, any AoE Convoke Moonkin. And remember to be in form. Also remember you can shift out of form during your Convoke if you all of a sudden need to heal. You don't need to cancel your Convoke. And that wraps this up. I think my servers are going to die. Hopefully when the servers come back up, I will be streaming. There is a new drops promo on Twitch coming up soon. This is also looking to be a pretty good push week for Tyrannical. And also I do want to work on my Evoker 1005 guide as well. So if you made it this far into the video, you either fell asleep or you enjoyed it. So I'd appreciate a like or a sub if you haven't already. And if you have any more questions or things that you think I missed out in the guide, feel free to drop them in the comments, and then maybe other people can see them too. Thanks for watching, friends, and happy keying.